Welcome to Equitable Minds, a monthly podcast focusing on pertinent issues in the U.S. educational system and our society today. We bring to attention concerns in areas such as educational leadership, school and community, innovation in education, research to practice, and social and cultural challenges in schools. We invite experts, educators, and community members to discuss challenges and present solutions. I'm your host, Dr. Floyd Beecham, been a professor of urban school leadership at Lehigh University. Welcome to another episode of Equitable Minds. I'm Dr. Floyd Beecham, your host. And as always, I'm joined by my co-host and graduate assistant, Yulitza Corsino Davis. Hey, Yulitza, how's it going?
Hello, everyone. Yep. Hi, Dr. Beecham. Hi, Berwick.
All right. So our special guest today is Berwick Augustin, an educational consultant, author, and speaker who focuses on helping individuals and organizations enhance their cultural diversity and effectiveness. Mr. Augustin has been an educator for over 10 years, teaching Haitian Creole, reading and writing. He also has authored several books, spoken word albums, and plays, and is the founder of Evoke 180 Publishing, a literary and performing arts organization. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome, Berwick.
What's going on, everyone? What's going on? Thank you for having me.
All right, man. Hey, thank you for joining us today. Maybe one day we'll get so advanced we'll have we can hit the button, have like automatic applause and like all the sound effects and all that cool stuff.
Yeah, that would be pretty cool.
One of these days. Well, again, Berwick, welcome to the show. And I'll just say for the record right now, the way that this actually happened, Berwick actually reached out to us and asked to be on the show for the first time ever. Usually, Yulitza and I in our meetings will consult with one another and we'll try to find educators, leaders, folks to invite to be on the show. Berwick actually sought us out. So, Berwick, here's a question this is not really an official question, but sort of how did you find us, if you don't mind telling our audience?
So I released my latest book, The Education Formula, last fall, and so I was talking to one of the individuals who worked with me in terms of the marketing, and then she was like, you need to get on a lot of podcasts on education. And I was like, well, I don't know any podcasters like that. She was like, well, just go online, search them out, send them an email. And so I did just that. And especially with Apple Music, the podcast section. So I just keyed in like the keyword and your podcast was one of the many that came up. And so I sat down and just started typing away. That's how it happened.
Oh man, that's awesome. That is awesome. Hey, and with that, and speaking of the book, and we'll, like I said, we're going to get to the book. But first, we just want to know a little bit about yourself. So please tell us about your K-12 school background experiences.
Well, I guess the short version of the story, right, is I was born in Haiti. I migrated to Little Haiti, is a section in Miami, Florida, in the mid '80s. At the time, it was very, very difficult to be Haitian. If you were Haitian, like you were getting jumped, you was getting ridiculed, and it literally to leave school and go home was like the battleground, right? We literally had to walk from school to home with like sticks and rocks just to get home safely. That's how crazy it was. So just imagine trying to go to school to learn language and at the same time just trying to survive, right, in a 10-year-old body. So it really didn't make sense to me because I was like, I came from a country where all of us were Black, and I'm in another country where the majority and the neighborhood, it was a predominant Black neighborhood, and I was just confused as like why these kids are so different, and what was it I looked like them, right? And so that was a question that was very it was a intriguing question for me even as a child, right? And so fast forward, right, being able to matriculate that, I went off to college at Florida State and at Florida and FAMU and Tallahassee, and I came back to South Florida to teach, right? And so in the classroom, I was like, you know what? Like I remember my experience, and
Mm,
so I made a vow that I would only work and and Title I school, predominantly the schools where Black and Brown children are, and just to be able to help them navigate, especially the immigrant children, just to help them navigate the spaces that I know that I struggle with, right? And to be able to bring some kind of equity into into the school system sometimes where it's non-existent, right? And so I started working at a high school, a predominantly Haitian high school called North Miami Senior High School. And then I went from there and did a huge shift.
mm.
I worked at a elementary school, and I spent about 7 years there. And I left there and went to a 6 to 12 school, where I, I taught writing for 6, 7, 8 graders, and then I became a reading coach and brought at a K through 8. And then I went back to Miami and became an assistant principal for the same 6 to 12 school that I worked at. So my experiences with K through 12 gone from high school to elementary to middle, uh, K through 8, and back to 6 to 12.
Wow. Okay, man. And kind of as a follow up, so what made you kind of decide to do what you're doing right now? How did you transition out of administration and into educational consulting and authorships and all this?
So I was always a writer. Well, no, I'll take that back. But and in college, I I had an experience where I lost a very close friend of mine, a childhood friend of mine, and that began my writing career per se, right? Because it was always in me. I thank God for gifting me with the ability to write, but it was never poured out of me because I was into sports, as most young Black men in South Florida are. Uh, so but that's when I got into on the poetry, the spoken word, on the playwriting, and so the writing element was always there. Now, in terms of transitioning out of administration, I've always felt like I was created to do more, right?
Mm,
And so the more I began to work and understand how administration worked, and also the fact that I was blessed enough to go to different schools and do trainings and speak to other individuals, whether they were students or adults, right? And I started realizing the impact that uh, I was able to have just by going to speak or do trainings elsewhere. And I was like, you know what? Instead of staying at one school to be able to try to make a difference, I, I can do a lot more if as a consultant, because the need is there, right? And so and also the flexibility
mm.
because my wife and I we went on a journey to homeschool our kids for the first about 10 years of their lives.
Mhm.
And so it was extremely difficult as well, you know, trying to run a business and homeschooling 3 little kids and just and just between the family and everything that was going on, the flexibility also was extremely important. So that also played a role in just being able to transition and be able to do more.
Okay. Excellent.
So now I want to talk about your new book. So what inspired you to write the book, The Education Formula?
The inspiration behind the book, the education formula, is just, you know, all of the things that I've learned over the years, right? With 20 plus years of experience in education, uh, and just having to consult, having conversations with teachers, administrators, parents, um, community leaders. It was I found myself saying a lot of the same thing to different people, and I was like, how about I put it in the book, right? Because a lot of things that I was saying, it was like, oh man, this is good information. And, you know, most of us, you know, we have a conversation. We we retain a small percentage of what we hear, and so that really inspired me, especially the fact that education has been going through a crisis, right? And for me, from my experiences, from what I've seen and heard, is that approaching education from a village mentality, to me, have been the most effective. Uh, and I mean, a lot of times we say it takes a village, but to actually roll it out, play it out, act it out, and see the impact, it's really rewarding. And so that was the that was that was inspiration behind that.
Just one quick question. Before, like when you say it takes a village, so I know that that's part of the title also. So what do you mean? What do you mean for you? What does that look like?
Um, the village, the village. So what I mean by that is education starting with the parents, right? And and then it flows from the parents to the school, obviously, right? The community, right? The businesses, and just where education is just not between the four walls of the school, right? Because historically, that's what we think of when we think about education, but that's not really the root of it, right? It's part of the process, but it's not the process. I think that's what we need to understand. I want people to understand that once we look at it holistically, then it's a different ballgame.
And speaking of the book, once again, the book is called The Education Formula. Uh, and you're probably going to hear us keep saying that several times. The education formula, just so people can get it in their minds. And just as a sidebar, Berwick, is it best to get that on Amazon or directly through a source related as to you, or what's probably the best way to get your hands on the book?
Um, the 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 book is on my website, berwickAugustin.com, and it's on Amazon and wherever books are sold. I would definitely want you to come to my website because then there's so many other resources there that you're not going to find on Amazon that are connected to me. So, uh, absolutely.
All right, so yeah, let's if we haven't done this before, I know we promoted the book already, but let's also promote his website on on Equitable Minds. Also, as we can be found on the Facebook page, Equitable Minds. Also, my own website, and also on LinkedIn because we'll both put it on LinkedIn too. All right, had to get that out of the way. Berwick, in the book, maybe you can talk to us a little bit about the formula itself. In the book, you say respect and accountability equals growth. Maybe you can talk to us a little bit about that formula and how it weaves itself through your book, and how do you kind of keep going back to it and utilizing it in the book?
Yeah. So that man, uh, I don't know when God dropped that in my spirit. Well, it was like in the middle of the night, but it was like when it came, I was like, and I thought about it on so many different levels and different aspects, and I was like, it makes sense, right? Because in any of the components, so I started the book with the first three chapters. Excuse me, the first three chapters are dedicated to the parents, and after that, I transition, and it is a chapter for the policymakers, and then for the principals, right, the administrators, and then the teachers. And there are a couple of chapters for the community leaders, the businesses, and the last chapter is to the students, saying like, hey, if all of these people are working for you and you don't show up, this doesn't work, right? And
Mhm.
so um, when when I decided to do that, I thought about your respect in any of those components, right? If respect doesn't exist, right, for either education or the individuals in education, and then if there is no accountability within any one of those uh, s- shareholders that I just named, it's not going to be any growth, right? So any way you cut it, like that formula fits.
I thought it was really interesting, and there's some there's some there's a lot of work going way back on character education, moral education. I did my dissertation on character education, and when I read your some of that in your work, it made me really start to think about um sort of how values undergird a lot of what we see in education. It's almost like everything we do has um, if not an explicit value attached to it, an implicit value is attached to it, right? You know, and in some of the work I'm talking about, they talk about things like respect and responsibility are two big things that came up. So when I saw your work, I was like, man, this reminds me of, wow, I got a book on my shelf right now called Educating for Character, Thomas Lacona. And in his book, he talks about the idea of, the two other R's, respect and responsibility, reading, writing, respect and responsibility. So I was like, man, I think you're on it with, with the way you've attached and connected to things like respect.
Yeah, and it's funny you say that because in the first couple of chapters where I speak to the parents, there's a component in there where I talk about responsibility, right? And I say that that is a skill that's transferable, and if once your child goes into a classroom, to be able to be responsible for their work, that's something that starts at home, from the chores they do at home, right? And building that skill and understanding that if a child shows up with respect for themselves, for their family, for the teacher, and have some kind of level of responsibility, I'm like, you've helped the teacher with half of the work, right? I was like, because a teacher could be the best teacher in the world, but if your child does not respect authority and does not respect it, there's nothing that individual can be able to do, right? And once you attach that with the responsibility piece, now it just makes it that much sweeter in the classroom. And I was like, trust me, every teacher would thank you, and be able to to um, to but also it's a mindset, shift, right? Because I was at a teacher conference with a parent, right, with a fifth grader, and so the mom was like, she was livid. She was blaming everybody else. She was like speaking in cursive, right, and saying all of these, all of these explicits about, y'all ain't doing y'all jobs, so on and so forth. After she was done, I was like, man, I said, let me explain something to you. I said, I said, your child's education is, I said, you're the teacher. I'm not. She's like, what do you mean? You don't want in the classroom. I said, I understand. I said, but I have this child for maybe 9 months out of her life. And that's a season, but you got this child for a lifetime. I said, I am one of the individuals who's helping you this year, not even a year, these 9 months. And I would never, I may not ever see this child, and I haven't. I haven't seen a little girl since, right? And I was like, just understanding that education starts with you, it starts at home, and every year somebody's helping you educate this child, right? And I think I think a light bulb hit. She looked at me like nobody ever said that to me that way. I was like, well, that's how you need to start approaching it. I said, because then once you approach it that way, by the time you get to the classroom, it's an understanding, it's an accountability with this child. This child is going to know that, hey, my parents mean business and this is important. And so I need to show up and show out, right? So that way it makes everybody else's job a lot more efficient and effective.
Now, Berwick, like I said, I mean, you and I share and maybe all of us on this line, I think we share the experience of being classroom teachers at one time. But here's a question for you, and it's just as a follow up. What happens then? And this is what I can hear. I can hear other teachers asking right now. Yeah, but what happens when the child comes to the classroom and does not have respect and responsibility already built in, or they don't have a lot of home family support, and maybe they're not accustomed to those values? How do we operate then?
Yeah, and that's where we are in education, unfortunately, right? Because a lot of well, I'm not gonna say a lot. A good majority of kids in certain schools, or I would say almost all schools, right, where sometimes you're gonna have the parent come in and disrespecting the teacher. So if a parent is doing that, then how you expect the student to, right? Because half the time I'm gonna get my mom to come cuss you out. Like, okay, so just that formula in itself is just backwards, right? So how do we deal with that? Um, and 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 this is where it's one of those things that are extremely important. Where that's extremely important because where, as an educator for myself, I'm going to speak from my experience, right? So uh, I had a no nonsense rule in my class, right? From the very beginning, I communicated with parents and I told them, this is how this class is going to function, so that when things happen, not if, but when they happen, so that there are no surprises,
Hmm.
right? And I made sure that I was on board with administration in terms of the discipline plan, or what was in place, and just kind of fine tune that for my space, right? So that if your child has a detention, and it's one of those things that now it become an inconvenience for you, like it's no misunderstanding that I didn't know about it, right? And I found out that each time I set the standard, and I remain consistent, right? And it wasn't always perfect all the time, right? But the kids rose up to to the standard. Now, what happens is not, if a teacher is inconsistent with whatever discipline plan that's in place, if they're inconsistent, or if if they're if they don't have a system in place, period, then it becomes it becomes a show, right? Everybody is going to implement whatever it is that they want to implement, right? I've had to show up at a child's football practice, right?
Mm.
And surprise him because he's bragging around school, or he's on a football team, so on and so forth, right? Like, I think the kid was like in the third grade. He's on a football team at the park, but yeah, he wasn't doing his work, right? And he was one of my special children, right? And so I was like, okay, so I found out something that he's passionate about. So while he was at practice, I showed up, and so his eyes grew like this big. And so the coach was like, "You his father?" I said, "No." I said, "I'm his teacher." He's like, "Oh, nice to meet you." I said, "I'm like, man, let me get your number." And I was like, yeah. And so we exchanged numbers. And I was like, "Is he doing good in school?" I said, "Man," I said, "I wish I could say that he is." I said, "He's a bright kid." I said, "But he could be very distracted, and his grades are not looking too tough." And from that point on, his behavior changed in the classroom.
Mm.
I just had to find what it is that was important to him, right? So I say all of that to say those situations, it could look totally different for different individuals, but at the end of the day, the educators needs to have some kind of system in place and be consistent with it, and find allies. The first
Mm.
ally is the parent. If the parent is not cooperating as an ally in your school, and this is also where like the community and things of the nature comes in, and again, embracing the whole, like, because there are other individuals, whether it's church, there are other people in this and the kids' lives that, who has their attention. We just have to find out who those individuals are.
Thank you.
Yeah, well said. Um, what was the greatest challenge in writing your book?
Um, Try not to say too much. I think like trying to keep it to like 10 chapters, and looking at chapters, and also finding out that since I thought about one thing, I felt like I had ADHD. I was like, oh, what about this? What about that? And I was like, hold up, this chapter is supposed to be about this right here. Let me try to stick on. And just also feeling like it's not ready yet. It's not good enough. I could add this. I could add more. And I had to literally stop myself. Like, no, we need to have a hard stop. And I had other people read it, just so that they could give me the feedback, and we're able to land where the book is right now.
Thank you. Yeah, I understand the process right now. I'm in the process of writing my dissertation, and it's been like, I think, oh, I didn't address this, I didn't address that, but if I addressed everything, it would be a lot longer than it is, and it's already very long. So, so most definitely, I understand how that can be really challenging. Um,
Absolutely, absolutely. End up with an encyclopedia.
yep, exactly. Yep.
Well, yeah. Look, as a also as a fellow author, what advice would you give to up and coming authors who are also interested in writing a book like you did? What advice would you give to them?
The advice that I would give them would be to just start, right? I think like the biggest thing that as educators, artists, whatever label that you want to use, is just to start, because that's the hardest thing. Because sometimes we are our biggest critics, and once we start, then the process becomes a little easier. We start to navigate and find our way. But if everything's in your head, then you're never going to get out of your way, right? And so I would say to start, and that's why writing has an editing process, right? And not trying to be perfect the first or second time. Just get it out, right? Just get it all out, and after that, and sift through it, and work with an individual who can be able to help you. Because what helped me was the fact that I do have a publishing component to my company, where I help authors navigate those spaces, and I help them outline their thoughts. I help them solve whatever problem that they want to solve with the book. I help them identify who their target audience is, just so that the writing is very strategic and specific, right? And so the fact that I do that with others was something that was able to help me. But yeah, just start. And after that, find individuals who can help you navigate that space.
Okay. And with your and by the way, this was you were published through Evoke 180 Publishing, which is your company, right?
Yes, yes,
Oh. Do you also publish other authors too?
absolutely. I have a host of authors on my publishing website. So on my website, there's a tab that says publishing, and once you click on it, it takes you to evoke180.com. And I have a list of other authors that I've helped. I'm currently working with 4 of them right now.
Oh man, okay, that's awesome. All right, so again, here some more free publicity here for folks out there who are thinking about writing a book or publishing. Here's another outlet here. Take a look at Evoke 180 Publishing and see what Berwick has to offer.
Yes, what the author has to offer.
Right, right.
So, can you tell me what's a topic in the book that you didn't get to address that you wish you would have been able to address, or maybe that's come up since that you're like, okay, if I do another edition, that's something that I'd like to include?
Um, I think it was a couple, but I think the one that stands out the most might be equity, right? I think equity is, and that was another thing uh, that really I gravitated towards podcasts because it had equity in there, right? And that's something that's very big for me. Going back to the experience I had when I first came to this country, I was just like thinking about the lack of equity and our school systems, where they don't tell the entirety of well, they don't tell our story as Black and brown people, right? And one of the simple things that I started doing with my kids when I started teaching, I would get all of the kids together, and we start in front of the class, and I'm like, since the majority, 99% of them were Black, right? I said, you know what? We're going to start on a little journey in the classroom, and we're in Africa, and I would name different places around the room, and we would just go around, and I'm like, this is a family. And I'm like, I'm gonna drop the mom here, and over here could have been Jamaica, and the father was in the Bahamas, the son was in Haiti, and so by the time we were done around the room, everyone ended up at different spaces. I was like, where did we start? It was like Africa. I was like, okay, so these people in Cuba, what do you call them now? They go, oh, Cubans. I was like, what about in Haiti? They call them, oh, Haitians. And so they realized like we all came from the same place because of the Middle Passage. We families were separated, never to see each other again. And now today, thinking that we're different because we've labeled ourselves, Jamaicans, Bahamians, Haitians, African Americans. right? And so just something as simple yet powerful as that could have and would have stopped a lot of the nonsense that happened when I came here in this country, because ultimately what ended up happening was because we had to move together and protect ourselves, right? It became gang activity. A lot of lives were lost, right? All because of the miseducation, right? So I think just the equity piece and understanding how powerful and how important it is, and to the point where I started authoring um, children's book in English and in Creole, which I was able to sell to some of the school districts down here in Florida, right? Because I as an educator, I'm looking around for resources. I'm like, they don't exist, right? And if we don't tell our story, nobody else is going to tell it, right? And just that in itself as an equity piece, in the midst of others that we don't have time to talk about right now. But I think that's a big piece of the pie that education really needs in order to be able to. Honestly, I just feel like we need to blow up the system and start over. But that's a different conversation.
Oh, Berwick, with that, I thought that was a powerful example that you just gave. But it made me also think about this too. You're in Florida. Look, can you do that in Florida now? These that like an activity where you're actually sending kids to different parts of the room. Florida has some very strict guidelines with regard to critical race theory and the teaching of Black history, other histories, any history that's not typical mainline mainstream American history.
um, so I'm not in the classroom, but if I were, I would still do it. And and the reason why I feel so strongly about that is because it I'm not breaking um, I'm not breaking the law by telling kids the truth. And if that means that if I were to like lose my job because I'm telling kids something about their history that is the truth, then I'll be willing to take that bullet, right? And and what we're seeing right now is that it's a it's a huge influx of of, of parents who are homeschooling their kids now,
Mm.
because they're starting to realize with all of this political nonsense going on that education is no longer about the kids. It's about everybody else's agenda. Uh, and 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 there are schools that are like popping up all over the place. Now, that could be problematic too, right? Because if you don't have trained individuals teaching kids, you also do them a disservice, right? But I believe because I am at this place where um, I, I'm not enslaved to a 9 to 5 at a school in order to make a living, right? Because information that I know that I've learned, I'm still learning. It's something that is valuable. It's something that is valuable. I know plenty of people who would be willing to uh, invest in that for their children, right? And I think with that mindset for me, right, I don't think it's something that needs to stop. And I think it's also very important for people to understand that they need to be engaged in their local government, right? And parents need to raise their voices, and not just have these sidebar conversation amongst ourselves, but to go to the people who are making these decisions and to be able to stand up and rise up and be able to be like, okay, for what's right. You know what I'm saying? Because part of the problem is, when things like that are happening, you have a select few or a small percentage who are actually, actively I'm going against. So everybody else is just like, man, whatever. It doesn't matter, or they just get mad and just keep it moving. But getting mad, keep it moving doesn't change anything, right? And so Florida is very weird right now, in a lot of different ways, and I'm praying that changes. But at the same time, I just think that there's so much power in unity, and there's and so much power in people knowing how to how to move, how to move together and create a movement, right? And be smart about it. You know what I'm saying? Because I think they expect us to react a certain way and to do certain things. But the fact that we are intelligent Black people or Black and brown people, there are other ways. Just like they can create these things, we can also counteract these things with the right approaches.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Berwick, earlier you had mentioned that the chapters of the book include parents, policymakers, principals, students. Um, you kind of talked about this a little bit earlier, but why did you structure the book in this way, dedicating a chapter to each of these groups? And you kind of talked about policymakers, but you have policymakers actually in there as a group that you're talking explicitly to. So, can you talk about the structure of the, like I said, of each of those chapters, and maybe speak to that idea of policymakers because you just talked about it right now. You know, is it possible to even reach some of these folks who are doing this? Because some of these folks are policymakers who are making up some of the kinds of laws that are actually counteracting the things that you're actually talking about.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, and it's very intentional, extremely intentional. I I put a chapter for the kids last, um, to as an irony, right? Because if education is supposed to be about the kids, and the kids are the last on the totem pole, right? And that's the situation now. So I put it last on purpose, uh, and I put the parents first on purpose because, as I said earlier, everything stop at the feet of parents. Uh, and honestly, if today parents would, the majority of parents decide to, I'm going to homeschool my kids, the school system would crumble, right? Currently, in the district where I live, um, they're closing down schools because of in the last couple of years. In the last couple of years, they've lost 53,000 students, either to private schools, relocation, right? So this parents don't understand. A lot of parents, I'm not gonna say all, don't understand the power that they have, right? Power that they have for one in influencing on their children, the power that they have and their voices and speaking out, especially in the public school system where their tax dollars are the ones that are funding the schools. And so when they speak, uh, the school district will listen. But the thing is, our community just we're not speaking, and that's why they're a lot of time they're underfunded, right, and undermined,
Mhm.
right, and we talked about the piece where they need to do the work inside the home. So at the core of the child of education is the parent, right? As far as the policymakers, I just wish that more policymakers were educators, who get in the classroom, who understand plight, right? But at the very least, just to have respect for the profession, right? I spoke about that in the chapter. Just to be able to, if you're going to create a policy, who's keeping you accountable, right? And where's the accountability piece for you to for you to decide we're no longer going to teach about Black history? Like, who keeps that person accountable, right? And for you to just sign a piece of paper and all of a sudden like all this stuff just happens. That's a problem, right? Which is why supposedly in this country, right, presidents aren't allowed to just make laws and so on and so forth. It's supposed to be a check and balance system, the way that our government is supposed to be, right? So in the same aspect, as far as the formulas, like respect plus accountability equals growth. And if we've been educationally, if our country has been on a decline and not growing, like we need to revisit. Um, we need to do something different. And I'm not talking about tests, the multi-billion-dollar testing industry. That's not a different thing that we need to do, right? So whether they wanted to hear the message or not, it needs to be said, right? So and I think that hopefully there are a couple of people who are sitting in those boardrooms who didn't park their conscience in the parking lot. We can be like, hey, guys, let's really think through this, right? And maybe for the individuals who are going to be part of the policymakers in the future who get a chance to read this book, right? And maybe something will resonate with them. So that by the time they get into those seats, that that they could be the voice of reason in the room, right? And so, and the reason why I put policymakers second is because after the parents' influence, unfortunately, as we're talking about Florida, right? It's really devastating for an educator who has sleepless nights, working on lesson plans, caring about these kids being overworked and underpaid, and it's like you on the front line, and you're doing all that you can, and just get deflated because somebody signed a piece of paper, right? And so it's so impactful, because what they do is, like, once they do this, they create these systems or these laws, and they put pressure on the school district. The school district put pressure on the principal put pressure on the teachers put pressure on the kids. Right, so now the kids are like, oh, I gotta pass this test, so on and so forth. Now the kids have all kind of like anxiety, and it's all this unnecessary pressure, and it has nothing to do with education, right? And it's about all these other agendas, right? So I think, like, they're in a place of influence, too much power, if you ask me. But and then after that, of course, then we go into actually inside the school, talk or the chapters to the administrators and the teachers, right? And then after that, I'm a strong believer in making education practical, and that's where the businesses come in at, right? Internships, right? I'm plugging the community in so that a kid can get a chance to experience something that they think that they may want to study. Not every kid is going to go to college, but electricians make six figures. Mechanics make six figures, right? There are so many other things and trades that our kids need to be exposed to. I think education needs to include that, right? So that when they graduate out of high school, if they don't have the capability or if they don't have the drive to go to college, there are options that make sense.
Thank you.
Yeah, most definitely. Okay, so I'm going to switch gears a little bit. So now I want to ask you so with the COVID pandemic, there's been a lot of changes. And so what do you think, how has the COVID pandemic impacted K-12 education, in your opinion?
Man, COVID has impacted K-12 education in multiple ways. It exacerbated the crisis that we already knew what's going on in education, from the equity piece to teachers being overworked and underpaid. And I think I saw a lot of memes, a lot of stuff on social media where parents were like, schools need to open to get these kids out of my house. I didn't realize teachers had to go through so much. Like y'all need to pay these teachers more. It's like, yeah. Oh, so now you see, you don't want to deal with your own kids. Imagine having 25 of them in the room, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think it allowed some parents to actually have a deeper understanding and appreciation for teachers. I personally wish that appreciation would have translated to a couple of more zeros in their paychecks. And I think another way that another thing that it did is that it made people realize that there's so many different ways, there's so many different things that we haven't tapped into when it comes to technology, right? And I think there's so many technology advancements that came because of COVID, or some of the things that were already here that weren't being utilized, that are not being utilized on a regular basis, right? I think that piece, it also burned a lot of teachers out, right? At the time I was an administrator when COVID happened, so I was on a Zoom for like 12 hours almost a day. I was hoping for school to open back up because I worked harder at home than I did in the building, right? And just to have teachers learn so many platforms, from from Google Classroom. Everything was digital, and they had to learn all of this stuff all at once while talking to blank screens because the kids either wouldn't show up. If they showed up, they just put up the screen and walked away. And it was draining. It was a lot of work, and a lot of teachers left the profession. So it was a brain drain because of that too. Uh, and that definitely impact uh, some of what's going on today, right? And then in the gap, right? And because kids weren't being taught um, effectively online, by the time they got back into the classroom, a lot of kids were like 2 to 3 grade levels behind because it was a huge slope, right? And so when they got back in the building, like we saw it, right? Because I was still in mentor when they got back in the building, and it was like kids were like they were already behind, right? And so after they got back in the classroom, they're still trying to catch up today, actually. And which is why it is so important for parents to be so involved because it's not just going to happen at the schools. Like I need parents to get that out of their minds. Like it is not going to happen between the four walls of school.
Mm.
That's not enough, right? And it doesn't have to be something where like it have to be overwhelming. Something as simple as reading with your children 5 to 10 minutes a day, reading to them or have them read to you and just having a conversation about what they read, right? So that in itself is something that especially when they're younger helps with reading fluency, the love of reading, their imagination, and just really good conversations that could come out of that, right? And just showing them that education is important, right? So and exposure, right? And making uh, trips meaningful and educational, right? And it could be and it's everything that they're already doing, but it's just being more intentional about it, right? And I think another way that that COVID uh, has impacted K-12 is that it allowed it made a lot of kids become I guess antisocial.
Mm.
I think that the social emotional aspect of children haven't been the same. But we saw a spike in suicide, uh, and and now with the advancements of like your TikToks and your Instagram and so on and so forth, it's just that screen time is something that is addictive,
Mm.
right? And it is and AI now has kids to the point where they're just putting on a prompt for everything, essays, everything under the sun. So the learning is just getting lower and lower if the community around those kids aren't like intentional, and it's a lot. It's a lot to combat, right? Because of this technology.
All right. Berwick, how about this one? So, what are some next steps for you as an author and an educator? Do you have another book in mind? Or are you opening another company? What's on the horizon for you?
um, Not another company. I think I, I don't know. I don't know. I think God has a sense of humor, right? So I've learned to write things in pencil and give them the eraser. Uh, because I used to say this is what I'm going to do, what I'm not going to do, and I've learned over the years that that's not how God moves. So in terms of what's going on now, I would love to be able to do more training and teaching around the content in the book at different, I would say, different cities, schools, and to really help a lot of underprivileged, underserved uh, individuals to understand the impact um, uh, that's going on in education and what they can, because a lot of people feel like they're they're hopeless, or they can't do anything, which is far from the truth. I've said with so many parents, And after, I explained to them, which is in the book, like, there are laws um, that are in place to protect you or to empower you when it comes to advocating for your child's education. And a lot of them, they don't know that, right? And also just being able just to do right, man, by people, because at the end of the day, all of us are getting older, and what we and the seeds that we plant today are going to determine what's going to happen once we become senior citizens, right? And so whatever it is that I can do to impact some kind of positive change, right, and to these young people who are going to be the adults later on is what I want to do, and as many places as I'm able to go to, as many doors as God decides to open, and I just love community work. I love grassroots community work. I love to see people understand and evolve and understand the power of education, and so whatever that may look like I'm in the process of I started doing a Haitian Creole class, right? And it was just doing it because it was like somebody asked me, like, I need to teach my kids Creole, and these are people who are Haitian themselves, but because again they losing the language because they're not teaching their kids. I started doing that just to help out a few people. Then others started asking me, and now I started having like clients be like, okay, I do a Zoom and so on and so forth, which ultimately I'm finalizing a self-paced online course now, um, to be able to at least the beginners level to to teach Haitian Creole. It gets around education. It's around, and even that in itself is is something that I've been educating a lot of parents on, that being bilingual is a superpower because it helps you a lot, not only as an adult once you start working, but even I remember like when I was in school, the fact that I knew another language, I would hear certain words, and I was able to put things together because research has shown that the mind, as far as comprehension, works a lot better when you know multiple languages,
Mm.
right? Which ties in back to education. So whatever language that you speak, like speak it to your. There's no reason why your child shouldn't know the part of their identity. You know what I'm saying? So just like little things like that around education. That's the space that I think I see myself moving forward. Whatever that may look like, it may morph into like other things. But right now, I don't have a second book because I think I have about 6, 7 of them. I need to work with a marketing person to get them out there more instead of just keep putting this content out here. But that's the plan.
Well, look, Berwick, please keep us posted on what you got going on. Uh, like I said, we'll certainly like to check back in with you at a certain point to see to really see your growth. And we just really thankful that you found us, we found you, and we were finally able to connect and sort of make this happen. So we're just really appreciative for your time today. So thank you, my brother.
Absolutely, man. I appreciate you guys for answering the call because not everybody responded to the email, the emails that I sent out. So I definitely appreciate the time as well.
Hey, look, man, we are an up and coming podcast. If you're out there and you want to talk, you got good content, you're doing something good for the kids, for the community, for our schools. We want to talk with you, just like with Berwick here. Once again, educator, author, publisher, all around community person, good person. Folks, go out there, support Berwick and support us. That does it for us for another episode of Equitable Minds. Again, I'm your host, Dr. Floyd Beecham, and as always, thank you so much to Yulitza Corsino Davis, who, as she's mentioned, is working on her dissertation right now. Good luck to her. She's going to
Thank
be
you, Dr. Beecham.
she's going to be doctor, and with that, also, she will no longer be my GA in my support here at some point. So I will be hiring any doctoral students out there who here at Lehigh University College of Education, or if you're interested in the doctoral program, you want to join us here in our mission to support us in the educational leadership program, be sure to look us up online. We'd be more than happy to talk to you. All right, everybody. Thank you once again to our guests. Thank you to all of our ongoing supporters. On our next episode, hey, remember, I don't do that. You'll have to tune in next time, see who our next guest will be. And until then, we'll see you later. Thank you.